It's the Nittany No Huddle podcast from the Nittany No Huddle studios. All right, guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we have our two other co-hosts, Deven Whitfield and Zach Rice, on the call. We're gonna head over to that call right now. Enjoy the show. I have to dig through my memory bank a little bit here. So first, we lost. Did we lose the coin toss? I don't know because I couldn't really see from my seat.
We did.
Oh, we did. Okay, so they deferred to the second half.
They did, yep.
Yeah, because they don't announce, in the stadium, they don't announce that. They were just teams just went their separate ways.
Yeah, so Auburn deferred, and then we put them heading to our student section in the second and fourth quarters.
Yeah, I like that. I was pretty. No, they were coming towards us second and fourth.
Yeah, they were coming towards us. Or maybe. Oh, okay. Okay, then I guess we did. We chose it right out of the gate to have them come to the student section, but
yeah. So, our first couple drives were we didn't score in the first drive, obviously, but we had great protection for Clifford from what I remember seeing. I remember there was a couple times where he just had plenty of time to throw.
Yeah, there was one play on either the first or the second drive where he stood in the pocket for 10 seconds and just waited, and he hit Lambert for a first down. But I'll say that I don't think the whiteout. I think Auburn did a really good job handling the whiteout and the crowd early on. They had two really positive offensive drives, and their first two drives were very positive. Scored points and defensively kept us off the scoreboard. It's sometimes Penn State just comes into these games expecting the crowd to kind of do it for them, and it takes a few drives to get things going.
So I think our first drive there was the drive we went down to midfield and then went for it on 4th and 1.
And I think a lot of fans, myself included, were okay with that. The aggressiveness coming out. You're the home team. You got the crowd. You've got this supposedly elite defense. Why not put the pressure on? And I know some of us have been clamoring for more QB sneaks over the years anyway, so I can't now complain about it when we finally get it.
Yeah, I think you have to go for it on 4th down there. Home game, whiteout crowd. You're trying to build that momentum. So love the call. Just didn't work out, but that happened.
Yeah, I'm okay with going for it on 4th and 1 there. 4th and 1 usually is about a 50-50 shot anyways, so really didn't give up too bad a field position being around the 50. I believe they went down there and kicked a field goal anyways, so when you're in a shootout like this, anytime you hold them to a field goal is going to be a win. They didn't score a touchdown there. I did notice off the bat, though, we were throwing a lot of screen passes, and it just gave me those instant Vietnam flashbacks to the John Donovan era of just throwing so many screen passes. I don't know what you guys saw there.
I like screen passes. I think they have a big time purpose, but you can definitely go overboard with them, hence the John Donovan era. But I can see why you would think that. I think it set up some stuff later on that gave us some chances, so I don't mind it, especially early to throw some screen passes. But we also need more screen passes. Not every time is a bubble screen. Can we run a different type of running back screen or a tight end screen? Just something different.
Yeah, I think that was a conscious effort by the offensive staff too, to just sort of massage Clifford into the game, get him some throws to just get some completions under his belt. It may have also just been something they saw with Auburn, with between Dotson and Washington and some of the deep threats. There may have been just some opportunities to get some underneath throws as they're taking away some deep threats.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I feel like I like when we stretch the field on some of the throws, like those screens, but when we start running tunnel screens, I feel like that's when it gets bad and we get really jammed up at the line. It just doesn't go anywhere. Honestly, I was waiting for them to try a shovel pass in there somewhere, but overall, the screens, they're whatever. I feel like we run them a little too much, but they're good when you're getting a lot of pressure against you.
but Auburn really was only rushing 3 or 4 every time. They really were not getting to Clifford very often, so I feel like the need for screens really wasn't there. I did notice our play action was working phenomenally.
Just to go back there, Jordan, for 1 second, with screens too, obviously you need good blocking wide receivers, and I don't think that we have proven as a group that this is necessarily a good blocking area for Penn State. I haven't seen Parker Washington prove that he can block. I haven't seen even Jahan Dotson prove that he is a great blocker yet. So it makes screens a little tougher whenever your receivers aren't established blockers.
I think a lot of that has to do with just personnel, and we've got a lot of smaller size receivers. But
Absolutely.
I will say to defend the screen passes, you did see the throwing those passes over and over again did open some things up later in the game, specifically that 30 or 40 yard pass to Theo Johnson was. If you go back and watch that one, that was definitely he faked blocking with Dotson. He was basically up at the line and Dotson was right behind him, and he faked a block, and both Auburn defenders just immediately jumped on Dotson. And I mean, credit to Clifford, but Theo Johnson was basically uncovered on that play. He just hit him right in the numbers, and we got 30 or 40 yards out of a play that looked to be sort of set up to make them think the screen was coming.
Yeah, it's very similar to, running the ball, setting up for the play action. I think we abuse it a little too much, and I believe one of us on the call has quoted our personnel as having a bunch of shrimps out there, so I think that is definitely a factor when it comes to blocking for the screens.
No comment.
Agreed.
But it's funny, like, I'm going through our list here of, like, game recap, and on the first half, I have Theo Johnson tight end, so I wanted to talk about that throw and that setup. Being in the stands, it's a lot. I feel like it's harder to be analytical of everything, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad for this one, especially that Zach's here and was watching it on TV, because between you and I, Jordan, it was it's so hard in the crowd to see all the little things, but that's why Zach is so great.
Well, credit to Herbie on that one, because he noted that as well. And I mean, that was an example too of Penn State used a lot of different formations, and not again with something like that, not in just sort of like a window dressing way, but different formations that actually resulted in different things that we as the Penn State fans aren't used to seeing. I mean, just in the first couple games already with Yursich as the OC, we're seeing under center, something that we've been begging for ever, and QB sneaks, and whether they work or not, I think it's something that you absolutely have to have the QB sneak in the playbook. And the fact that it's taken Franklin 7 or 8 years to even acknowledge that you have to have it is kind of baffling, but not to bounce around. But while we're talking tight ends, the rollout touchdown pass to Brenton Strange, the other tight end, was a great formation. Again, it's probably something you guys in the stadium didn't catch, but we basically had a tight end on the right side, and we had Brenton Strange and Dotson lined up like right next to each other as like wingbacks right next to each other. And the tight end on the line, I think it was Johnson, started blocking down, and Dotson jetted behind the line of scrimmage like he was going to get a jet sweep or something. And Strange, the inside guy, just kind of like leaked out. It was a great formation, something that personally I haven't seen Penn State line up in too much, and I think it was something that obviously caught Auburn off guard because, again, Strange was basically uncovered. I think, again, Clifford had a great game, but a lot of these big plays were just examples of Auburn just getting mixed up or Penn State showing them something they hadn't seen, and a guy just kind of running free. And you got to take advantage of those shots in big games against good teams.
Yeah, I agree. We actually had a great look at that play because it happened literally right in front of us. And we had a bunch of Auburn fans in front of us, and the guy was like, you got to cover like that tight end. You can't just walk out there. Like, I could have seen that play coming, which this guy was like totally full of crap because he thought he knew everything. But like that formation, I mean, we saw it happening. Like, everybody thought Dotson was getting that on the jet sweep, and Strange just walked out to the outside after like looking like he was going to block for the jet sweep. So I mean, that was a good play call. So the first touchdown we scored, which was the touchdown to Dotson in the back of the end zone, where Clifford overthrew it, but Dotson just made a great catch, even though he's wide open. Clifford, Like, that's something I've not seen out of him. He actually showed patience in the pocket, went through his progressions, and then rolled out and then hit the receiver, which I don't know. At the beginning of the year, I was kind of a Clifford hater, but I was very surprised with his play this weekend.
So as Jordan would probably say, I've been a Clifford protector, and largely because I one of the things I hate most about every fan base, and Auburn is a good example of it, is that they think they're just a quarterback away, and oftentimes the difference between the best quarterbacks in the country and some of like the quarterbacks in the second tier teams is not that great at all, and it's largely due to like surrounding cast. And I'll say, last night I don't recall I can't recall a Penn State quarterback against an elite opponent having so much time and being so well protected and barely getting hit as we saw last night. And so I think you got to shout out the offensive line and the tight ends, because Auburn just was not getting there. And I don't know, it didn't seem like they were really applying a ton of pressure or sending a lot of blitz, but he had all day, and he, when he had to move, he got out of the pocket and he was scanning the field while on the run. I mean, I think he had a few runs, but for the most part, when he left the pocket, his eyes were downfield and he was finding guys.
Yeah, I think Coach Franklin had a really quote about that in his post-game press conference, was that something that Clifford has struggled with in the past is keeping his eyes downfield when he doesn't have that protection. And Saturday night he had it and was able to keep his eyes downfield and really only made one bad throw and a couple maybe questionable throws, but only one bad throw. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I think, and it's hard when you don't know the other team's personnel, especially like a non-Big Ten team that I don't see a lot out of. But I think Auburn had some SEC dudes on that defensive line and just beef up front, and it just seemed like we weren't getting a ton of push from the run game perspective. And I think maybe Auburn was just sort of making a conscious effort, and not a bad decision coming into the game that we're going to make Clifford beat us. If you watch tape, especially last year with the train wreck that we had, you saw a team that was happy to run and get 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but when pressured, Clifford and Levis, made mistakes through the air. So it may have just been partially a defensive game plan that ultimately backfired, but to make Penn State beat them through the air.
Yeah, I mean, for me last year, I'm one of those COVID people who say it doesn't count just because, one, we were god awful, and two, we didn't play very well. So it's very hard to judge, in my opinion, anything from last year to this year. I mean, you can take certain stuff, but yeah, our offensive line just, I don't know why we just can't get our running game going. I mean, we tried to run the ball a lot, so I will say I'm loving our new offensive coordinator. Like, even though the run wasn't working, we didn't abandon it. We kept trying to do stuff to make it work, and try to get those yards. But, I think we had, correct me if I'm wrong, like 86 yards rushing or something. And some of those were QB keepers. So I feel like that's just not good enough to go deep into the Big Ten and win, especially against teams like Iowa, where we're really going to need to, I feel like, move the ball and keep the time of possession, which I said it right as we were leaving the stadium when they put the stats up right before we left. When I saw how close our time of possession was, I was pretty surprised, considering we typically don't play that type of ball. So I don't know what you think about that, Deven.
Yeah, I haven't been a huge believer necessarily in really any of our running backs that we have right now, and I'm not sure if it's that I'm not sure exactly where I want to go with this, but I haven't seen Noah Cain prove that he is an elite running back, so it doesn't really surprise me that we struggled to run against an SEC defense. But yeah, we definitely have to have a running game moving forward. The Big Ten is just too important. Time of possession in the Big Ten is just too important that we can't go full air raid, especially when we don't have the Jimmies and Joes that can do that. So, yeah, I'm glad we stuck with it, even though it didn't really work as well as I would hope. But it's early. Still week 3. Still time.
And
that's what I was thinking. Oh, go ahead, Zach.
I pulled the stats up, and we did. You're right. We for pretty limited success, we did pop a couple decent runs, but for the most part, we were getting it on a good run 2, 3, 4 yards. We had 33 carries for 84 yards and threw 33 passes. So the one thing you got to note there is that that's the type of balance that you want to have, especially in a big game. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback and say, well, we were so good through the air. Why don't you just keep chucking it? But I think part of that is obviously you got to keep the defense honest. And I would say on the flip side, I look at Auburn and I see they were 21 of 39 through the air for 185. So more pass plays and a lot fewer yards than we had, and 40 carries for 182 yards. And if you're an Auburn fan sitting thinking about this game, you're probably wondering, why did we throw 40 passes? Part of that is the second half they were behind and kind of had to play catch up. But really until the last few drives, if you're an Auburn fan, you were probably looking for run until you got into a 3rd and 8 or more situation. I know parts of the first half, especially in the second quarter, it just seemed like if Auburn just would have ran the ball on every play, they would have probably been fine and gotten points out of every drive. But they seem to kind of abandon their best. Well, I think are probably their two best players, Bigsby and Hunter, and they never really had. I didn't see anyone on their team as far as a wide receiver one, a guy that really separates. We'll see if somebody shows up during SEC play, but I think ultimately they're going to have to show something more than what they had through the air if they're going to be one of the top teams in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I have on our notes here exactly that. I was surprised, watching Bigsby run. That dude is going to be an NFL running back. I'm pretty sure, he has it. But I was surprised at the end of the game. I thought we had pretty much kept them in check the whole game. So I was kind of surprised when they had that many rushing yards. I just didn't realize that at the time. But back to our first half recap. There were some big mistakes made on our side. A dropped pick 6 by Brandon Smith. I don't know how that happened. I don't know what you saw on TV, Zach, but that happened right in front of us, and Deven and I just looked at each other like, how did he not take that to the house? So I don't know if you remember that play. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, he actually dropped that 3 times. He caught it, and it was a classic defensive player. He was already looking at the end zone before he really had secured the catch, and he basically was running and just left the ball in the air behind him. One of those things where you got to have it, but at the same time, it's a defensive player making a play and got a little excited. And I think if you go back and watch the film, you'll kind of get a good laugh out of it because he's running and bobbling this thing for 5 steps, and it looks like he caught it 3 different times. But a guy that was in the right place at the right time and was in the right place at the right time for most of the game, and I think a guy that most Penn State fans were looking at coming into the season as a guy that needed to have a big year and needed to be that sort of every down linebacker. And I think for the most part, he's shown up and done that. So we'll look past the one little drop pick 6.
It's really interesting to me, Zach, sorry, that you bring up that he was in the right place at the right time a lot. Because I know I said it to Jordan at the game. Is I did not feel like Brandon played really well last night, but he still led the team with 10 tackles, did almost have a pick 6, a couple other big plays. And still, I did not think he played very well. So that's interesting to hear from you.
Yeah, there was a lot of run plays where Auburn got some yards, and he was the guy that made the tackle on a play that maybe they got 8 or 10 or 12, but the tackle he made kept it from being 20 or more. And I would say on the whole, the linebackers did a pretty good job just sort of filling. I would note Jordan was right. 185 yards rushing is probably more than you wanted to give up. It's not terrible. And again, to a team that is just going to pound the rock, 40 carries for 185, that's not terrible. The big thing, I think, is the longest run of the night was the Jarquez Hunter run. I think he got 24 yards on that, and Bigsby had a 15 or 18-yard run. But they didn't bust any big plays. And I think that's the key. If somebody's going to run down your throat, you got to make them, it's got to be a 15, 16, 17-play drive. And eventually, there's going to be a fumble, or you're going to give them the backfield. Something's going to happen. If you don't give up that big play, you're really helping your chances at getting a stop ultimately.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of turnovers, I don't know why we made that play call at the end of the first half. Like, just throwing the ball deep there, I don't get the point. Like, we just get in field goal range and kick a field goal there. No reason to force that into triple coverage while getting hit. And that led into another terrible play call, which was Auburn had the ball on the 1. They took a knee. They're at like the half-inch line, and we don't burn 2 timeouts and make them run a play from there. Like, I don't know. What did you think about that, Zach or Deven?
Yeah,
Either one.
I was getting a little like exercised at that point because I think we did have. I think you said we had 2 timeouts. I think you're right, and they were on their own 2 or on their own 3. And on the first play, Bo Nix took the snap and backed up like 2 steps and kneeled. He was on like the 1 yard line. You take a timeout there. Now all of a sudden they're probably not kneeling the ball. You know, are you likely to make them run a play and get a safety? Probably not likely. Is it possible? It's definitely possible. So I think at that point, again, in that environment with that home stadium and that home crowd, I think you got to give your defense a chance to go out there and stuff them in the backfield for a safety. And that was one of the things that I haven't really seen a lot of media discussion about that. Franklin gets roasted a lot for a lot of the more like game management procedural type stuff, and right or wrong, I don't know.
I mean,
wanted to see
justifiably in my
timeouts
book.
there. Yeah, right or wrong. That one I wanted to see some timeouts there because I think if you're saying, the whiteout is the greatest home environment in college football and you have a defense that's going to be a top 5, top 10 defense, why wouldn't you put them out on the field in that scenario with, hey, one D tackle busts through and stops the play in the backfield, you get a safety. I wasn't happy with it, but you live and you move on.
Yeah, that was basically the end of the first half. I just would have liked for us to get points there at the end and just take a tiny bit of go up 2 scores at the end of the half. I think with our crowd, like that could have been huge. And transitioning into the second half, the first play of the second half, what is that guy doing? Like, oh my gosh, you cannot make that play. And I think that's just a bad coaching call. Giving, I believe he was a freshman, completely untested receiver, the ball to throw. And if you watch the replay, we don't fall for it at all. Our cornerbacks are in man coverage with safety over the top help, and they have them completely covered. And the wide receiver had no idea where to throw that ball and just ended up dropping it for us. So I don't know what you saw there, Deven. I know I was right next to you, but we all have different views. So
yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up. I mean, it kind of makes sense to me to try a trick play, but I would not try it on the first play of the second half whenever you just got a huge stop right before halftime. It's a 4-point game in a whiteout crowd. I mean, you're in the game, you're playing really well. I just don't see the need for it to put him to that position. And obviously it resulted in a Penn State touchdown a couple plays later. So it obviously Sunday night quarterback is what a terrible play call. I just don't understand why you would put your team in that position on the first play of the second half. So I don't know. Maybe Zach has a better idea, but it just seems odd to me.
Yeah, I'll say, and this is one where watching from home, it was an interesting dynamic hearing Holly Rowe, the ESPN sideline reporter, like right before the snap of that first play, they were checking in with her based on her interview that she had with Brian Harsin, the Auburn coach, and she quoted him as saying something to the effect of, we think we really ran the ball well on them, so we're anticipating in the second half just really leaning on the run game and coming out in this first drive, really establishing the run game. And then to hear that, and in the very first play to see this trickery was interesting. I think I'll play devil's advocate and say I think the time to do something like that is in a scenario kind of like right out of the gate, like right out of the first play of the game or the first play after halftime, just to see if you can catch somebody sleeping. But I think it is a tough ask. And they said on the program last night the kid was a former high school quarterback. So, on one hand, I get it. Don't put an inexperienced player in a situation like that. But at the same time, you're, a major college football player, and he's a former quarterback, so you'd expect him to have some ball handling skills. So I can see it both ways. But yeah, I think if you're if your message in that halftime locker room was we're owning the line of scrimmage and we're going to run down these guys' throats, it is interesting to come out and basically say, let's try something to trick them because we don't think we can run it down their throats.
Yeah, it puts you down by 11 just a couple seconds later whenever Penn State gets a touchdown. And from that point on, they like we talked about, they kind of abandoned the run as much as we thought they should have, just ran it down our throats every time. Now you're down by 11 and you start feeling a little bit of pressure to try to throw more often than you really need to. Obviously, they make a comeback. They get back into the game that we'll talk about here in a second. But I think from that moment, it kind of changed their gameplay, all because of that fumble to start the half.
Yeah, and like making that gamble there, I mean, obviously you don't know he's going to fumble there, but with how poorly Joe, the road warrior Nix, has played on the road, you do not want to put him in a situation where he has to feel that weight on his shoulders because we've seen he cannot do it. So I just think like they had all the perfect pieces to just, keep running the ball and kind of give him an out to just, keep checking the ball down. Because we saw, I think in the first half he had a pretty good throw that looked like a back shoulder throw, but I think he just underthrew it, to be honest. Zach, I don't know if you remember that throw or not. But
yeah, so that I'm thinking it was the one to Kobe Hudson, who is the kid who fumbled the end around, and that was a nice throw. I will say Bo Nix too, and I don't know if you guys caught this one in the stadium. There was a play. I'm thinking it was in the second quarter. I think it was Castro Fields, was just roasted and just burnt down the sideline, and Auburn's receiver Nix put it like right on the pylon, and he just didn't find the ball.
Yeah, that was right in our end zone. That was right in our end zone, literally right where I was standing or sitting.
That was a touchdown. I think it was Castro Fields. If it was Porter or somebody else, I apologize, but we were cooked, and Nix it was a catchable pass. The guy just never, I don't know if he lost it in the lights or he just got his head around late. He never found the ball. And from watching at home, it was like, oh crap, touchdown, and it just didn't happen. And
I think it was a bad throw.
I recall the throw being like right on the pylon, and the guy just didn't find the ball. But either way, whoever's fault it was a golden opportunity. If you're an Auburn fan, you look back, are there 2 or 3 plays where we lost the game? You're looking at the fumble on the first play of the second half, because you go from down 3 to down 11, and you really never close that gap. You end up losing by 8, and you could say that's kind of the moment that the touchdown or the incomplete pass. Another moment where you say, if the quarterback and receiver are on the same page, that's an easy 6 points. Every game there's a few moments you look back and say, Brandon Smith's interception on Penn State side, where if we have that one play, we put them away. And then you're going to see that on both sides. But I'll go to bat for Bo Nix a little bit. I thought he played pretty well. He made, especially in the first half, he made a couple of those back shoulder throws. I just think largely, a lot of his targets were to the tight end, who was not an overly athletic guy, but caught the ball every time it was thrown his way. I just didn't see them really having like a stud receiver. They didn't have a Jahan Dotson on their side. I don't know who his go-to guy is, and maybe they'll develop that as the season goes along. But I think when you start to face some of these LSUs and obviously Alabama, I'm not sold on Texas A&M yet, or Arkansas, but you're gonna face some defenses in the SEC where they aren't going to be able to just run Tank Bigsby 40 times a game, and they're gonna have to have something through the air. And I think at this point, if you're a Penn State fan, and we'll talk about this stuff towards the end probably, but if you're a Penn State fan, now all of a sudden you need to become an Auburn fan.
Yeah, so when I was on YouTube on our 3-hour drive back to Josh's house last night, I was in the deep trenches of troll warfare, and I saw this great comment that said it was from an Auburn fan. He was just like, I swear Bo Nix looks like he's out there on Dude Perfect, which is the YouTube channel where they do all the trick shots, just throwing balls to try and land them in empty trash cans like on the sidelines. So I thought that was pretty funny. I just thought everybody was hyping him up. Like, I saw people before the game saying he could be a dark horse for Heisman and stuff like that. So, I know it's like kind of the banter online and not always take all that stuff seriously. I thought he was nothing special. To be honest, coming into the game, I thought him and Clifford were very similar type of quarterbacks who have struggled to, really find that consistency. And then, I have to eat crow today because Clifford didn't miss a single pass in the second half, which is just unreal, to be honest. So,
yeah, I think they both were in similar situations coming into the game. Guys that have largely done okay for their programs, but have struggled to kind of take them to the next level. And I think, like I was saying earlier, most fans haven't what I would say is an unrealistic expectation of the quarterback position at programs other than Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson. And I think Clifford, like you just said, largely showed up. But I think they were in kind of the same situation coming into the game where fans were looking at them to say, hey, this is the type of game where it's going to be a tight game. It's going to be good defenses. You're going to have one of the quarterbacks is going to have to show up and sort of put the team on his back and win the game. And I don't think Clifford necessarily did that. I think he made all the plays that Penn State needed him to make.
Absolutely. Nothing else to add to that. He did exactly what he had to do to not lose the game, which Sean Clifford has not done in the past even, is just don't lose the game. You don't have to go out and be perfect like he was, but don't make those bad throws that you've done in the past, forcing it into coverage that isn't there, forcing it to Jahan Dotson whenever he's triple covered and you have a tight end wide open across the middle. He didn't do any of that last night, so he really showed up when we needed him.
yeah, and it felt like from my perspective, now being in the whiteout, it feels different, but I felt like we dominated that game. But every time I looked at the scoreboard, I was like, we could still lose this very easily right now. Like, I've watched enough Penn State games where I feel like no lead is safe. You know what I mean? Zach, I know you feel that way sometimes too, so I don't know what it felt like seeing the atmosphere from home as opposed to being there live.
Yeah, I was on pins and needles the whole night, and that's just part of playing good football teams is they're hard to put away. And, Penn State had some opportunities. Obviously the Brandon Smith interception probably puts the game on ice. Obviously if the fumble that went called as a fumble on the field and then was ultimately overturned as the player was down, which was the correct call. If they're able to get that fumble out before he hits the ground, that's a play that puts the game on ice. But it's just hard to put good teams away, and you see it weekly. You see it all across the country. You see UCLA losing to Fresno State. It's just hard to do. And so you're just going to have to win these nail-biter type games against good teams. And I think if you look at Penn State's schedule going forward, Indiana, Iowa, Ohio State, all of a sudden Michigan is just punching people in the mouth right now. Michigan State went down to Miami and spanked them. I've been telling people don't sleep on Maryland. There's going to be a lot of games like that where you're just going to have to trust the defense, and it's going to be hard to put teams away.
Yeah, I agree. And I told Deven, and he can attest to this. I looked over at him after the game. I was like, every single game that Penn State plays like this, I swear it takes like 5 to 10 years off my life. So I feel like this season is just going to be real detrimental for my health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Zach said, obviously we're still talking about the game a little bit here, but when we look ahead later on, like you look at that schedule and there's just nothing easy in the Big Ten. After Villanova this week, every week is just going to be stressful. So it's definitely, we're all losing years off of our lives thanks to Penn State football.
Yeah. And so back to getting into the third and fourth quarter, Deven pulled up a stat. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, Deven. I thought Auburn had really bad play calling in the red zone. I remember, towards the end of the game, it's like 4th and 2 or 4th and 1, and they're throwing a shoulder fade. Like, you have like a future, I think, NFL running back in the backfield who's been getting 4 or 5 yards of carry. Like, I feel like you have to run it there. But Deven brought up that they were 2 for 3 in the red zone, and Penn State defense has gotten stops on 5 out of 11 red zone trips through 3 games, which is kind of a crazy stat. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Deven.
Yeah, obviously just like we said about with Auburn stats being a little overflated, whenever you played Ball State last week, I didn't get to see a ton of the game, so I'm not sure how many red zone trips they had without pulling up the stats here and wasting everyone's time by looking that up. But you got to imagine a couple of those stops were probably against Ball State, and Wisconsin just could not score consistently against Penn State. So I don't have the information right in front of me as far as the play calling like Jordan's talking about. Maybe Zach has a better memory than I do about specific plays. But 2 out of 3 in the red zone is good as long as you're not giving up touchdowns every single time. So our defense is doing what they need to do, which is stopping teams from getting 7 points every time. I mean, we only gave up 2 scores last night to the number 22 team in the nation. So, yeah, defense is playing really well, obviously, and that's a good sign for us.
Yeah, I think if you're an Auburn fan, you're probably justifiably ticked off with that 4th down play call. I think the play calls on that series were largely really good, and I think there was one play, the Jarquez Hunter run and hurdle over Joey Porter that put them in the 1st and goal situation. That was, if you didn't get a chance to see the replay on the big screen in the stadium, you want to look this one up. They were in a formation like with a bunch to the right, and they essentially faked an end around with like everybody on the right coming back to the left. And it was a simple toss to the running back who was going right, but he was sort of screened by everyone else going the other way. And just about everybody on Penn State went for it. And you had a good, I can't remember if that was Smith, but after Porter got hurdled, there was really nobody, somebody chased him down from behind, either Smith or Lucada. But the first couple of plays, Auburn got to about the 2, and then that 4th and 2, you can't draw that play up. You can't throw the fade, and as Penn State fans, we've seen it over the years. You can't be throwing fades to 5'10", 5'11", however tall Kobe Hudson is, and you're going at Jaquan Brisker, a preseason All-American. It's just not a high percentage play. And I think if you're an Auburn fan, you say just hand it off and go up the middle, and I can live and die with that. But I'm not the offensive coordinator. Mike Bobo is.
That can't be his real name, right?
That's his real name, Bobo, C-O-B-O.
It's ridiculous.
I just think you play to your strengths, and if you lose, you lose, and if you get beat, you get beat. But you do the things that you're good at, and you don't get too cute. And I'll give you an example of going the other way. I like the Wildcat Tyler Warren play that Penn State used to score their 3rd touchdown of the game. I think it was a nice change of pace. It was something that we as fans obviously hadn't seen in the first 2 games, so Auburn hadn't seen it. I think we then went back to it on late in the game. We ran a 4th down play with it and telegraphed the shovel pass to Dotson from it. It just never had a chance. And again, you, on those big plays, I like going to Dotson in that moment, but I think on those plays you stick with the more traditional type plays that got you to where you're at, and the players that got you to where you're at.
To build on that, Zach, that Hunter play was in the stadium was just ridiculous. I had no idea, and I know Jordan did too. I had no idea who had the ball, and then you see Hunter sneak out on the sideline, and we both our jaws dropped on that hurdle. That was Saquon-esque at Iowa, just a ridiculous play.
Yeah, the design it was a great play design because, like I said, you had it was essentially just the quarterback with a toss right to the halfback, but you had about 3 guys in a bunch formation on the right that were screening the toss. They basically running between the quarterback and the running back and just sort of screened the toss. And if you're a Penn State linebacker, it's just a sea of humanity and everybody moving left to right, and then all of a sudden the running back's just running down the sideline and you never even seen him.
Yeah.
Hat tip to Bobo on that one.
Yeah, that was I looked over at Deven right after the hurdle and I was like, oh my God. Like I mean, I know like Sunday morning quarterback, whatever, but like, I feel like you cannot get hurdled like that. Like that is just, I'm honestly surprised. I forget who made the tackle on that, but they saved us the game there because if he gets in the end zone, like they go for 2. I think they might get it there. They probably just run it with Tank Bigsby. And I think after that play, if either him or Hunter gets the ball, they're scoring that 2-point conversion. They have all the momentum, and then who knows what happens after that. But yeah, that play was absolutely crazy. So
I'll circle back to what Deven was talking about earlier with some of the red zone stops, and I think that's been the story of the season for Penn State. I don't have the red zone stats in front of me either, but I do know through 3 games the team has given up 4 touchdowns, one of which was a garbage time touchdown to Ball State, and has forced 5 field goals. So this is just a gut feeling thing. I don't have the stats to bear it out, but I think anytime your defense, especially at the college level where kicking is not like it is at the NFL, anytime you're forcing more field goals, or you're giving up more field goals than you're giving up touchdowns is huge. Because at the end of the day, if you're forcing them to kick field goals, it's not a gimme proposition even at the end at 20, 30 yard field goals. And you've got 2 huge wins so far through 3 games that largely you can point to fourth down or fourth quarter goal line stands as the reason the win was secured.
yeah, and back to the kicking, I wanted to give props to Auburn's kicker. That dude had absolute ice in his veins. Both, I think he had 2 field goals on the day, but they were both not easy chip shot field goals, and he absolutely buried both of them and kept them in the game. If he just misses one of those, it's a completely different game. So I think special teams, especially in the college level, is something that gets overlooked a little bit just because of the flair of offense and all the different types of offenses. But, having a clutch kicker like that is just so imperative. So,
Two things off that, if I can, real quick. One, only because I was watching the program at home. Kicker was the younger brother of Daniel Carlson, who I think is the kicker for the Oakland Raiders. Yeah, he was good. I will say the one field goal, I think getting back to the moments that sort of define big games. If you're an Auburn fan, the second field goal that they kicked to make it 21-20, 4th and 1, I don't think you kick that. I think you go for it. I think Penn State caught a huge break on the drive. So Auburn was down 21-10 after the first drive where they fumbled in the first play, and they ultimately scored a touchdown to make it 21-17. And then Penn State kind of stagnated a little bit on offense, and the drive that Auburn kicked the field goal to make it 21-20, it felt like a drive where we just weren't going to get a stop. And I don't know about you guys, but when I saw them kick the field goal, I thought, that's great. Give them the 3 points. It just felt like one of those drives where we just weren't stopping the running game. It felt like they were going to get a touchdown. So, I mean, you can always Monday morning quarterback. And I think that kick was either the very end of the third quarter or the very beginning of the fourth quarter. So if you're Brian Harsin, you can't poke holes in it too much because you have at least a couple drives left to make up the deficit. So it's not like the last drive, but sometimes I think you just got to roll the dice and go for it.
Yeah, Zach, that field goal was the first play of the fourth quarter. They called a timeout, I believe, to talk about it too. Is that correct? Do you remember that?
Yeah,
no, you're right. And
yeah,
they
so
called
they
a
blew that
timeout.
timeout there.
Yeah, they blew the timeout right at the
timeout.
beginning of the first play of the fourth quarter, because I remember it was super loud, and I think they ended up calling a timeout right after that, like end of the fourth quarter, going in, like coming out of the turn where they came down to our section, Deven.
Yeah, exactly. And I 100% agree with you, Zach. We, like we mentioned earlier, we had a couple real dedicated Auburn fans in front of us from Alabama, and they were all about the field goal. And even at the time, Jordan and I looked at each other. So you're down by 4. You have a little bit of momentum. We're really struggling to stop the run. I just feel like at that time you probably take a chance, because even if you don't get that conversion, it's still a 4-point game. And obviously, like we mentioned, a 43-yard field goal in a Penn State whiteout is no chip shot. Just imagine if he misses that. So I agree with Zach. I probably would have went for it there, but again, I sit on my couch on Saturdays, so maybe that's why I don't get to coach. I don't know.
Yeah, and like I said, they definitely had plenty of time after that, so it's not something you can point to and say that lost us the game if you're an Auburn fan, because they had 3 or 4 drives after that. I will say, getting back to somebody mentioned, that was a complete waste of a timeout. And one of the things that drives me nuts at the college level and at the pro level is I would
I would never call a timeout for any reason other than in the last 2 minutes of the game. I don't care about 5 yards. That timeout would have been massive for Auburn on the very last drive of the game where they got down to about our 20-yard line and ultimately had one kind of last-ditch effort to throw it into the end zone. But had they had that timeout, that drive maybe gets a little bit further. But, again, hindsight 2020.
I mean,
the wasting of timeouts at that level of college football happens so much, and I've had it with James Franklin on those types of issues before, but I don't know. I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, I mean, Deven and I literally had this discussion in the stands because it was right before we were in the red zone, I think, or not even the red zone. I don't remember. It was like first down, and we took a timeout instead of taking like a delay game or a false start or somebody in motion. I forget, something happened. But I was like, why are we wasting timeouts in the first quarter? Like, it just drives me nuts because those timeouts at the end of games and the end of quarters, they are worth more than anything because you can't get them back. So, I mean, you better, if you're calling a timeout, you better be scoring on the next play, or that is not worth it, in my opinion. Got anything, Deven?
No, I mean, you guys kind of hit it. Like, obviously, as a basketball coach, we get a lot for. We only have 5 timeouts for a game instead of 3 each half. So I feel like we have to really manage our timeouts even better than a lot of football coaches. And I think that football coaches, like Zach said, just they get in this habit of burning a timeout super early whenever they could just take a 5-yard penalty. I mean, if your offense is good enough, you can get 5 yards on a play. So I don't know. It's tough, but I don't know.
Football is the only sport too. Well, not relative to like basketball, for instance, where there's no other way to stop the clock in football. In basketball,
exactly, you're right.
The clock is your enemy in basketball too, but there's other ways to stop it. In football, all you have is those timeouts. So I would cherish them, but at the same time, I guess if they were committed to kicking the field goal there, then those 5 yards would matter. But I don't know. Hindsight's 2020.
Yep. All right. So last thing with the game, how big was that pass interference call with 1:27 left on Dotson? I mean, I don't know if we win that game if we have to punt there because there's a lot of time left on the clock.
That was such a cool experience too, to be at the game for that, because we all saw it coming. Like, I don't know what angle they showed you, Zach. I haven't been able to rewatch the game today. Obviously I had to sleep off the win, but as soon as they came out and they had single coverage on Dotson on the outside, Jordan and I looked at each other and said, we're just going to throw it up there and hope for the best because it's Jahan Dotson. He's either going to catch it or he's going to get a call. So it was so clear to everybody in the stands. And I'm curious how it was on TV there, Zach.
Yeah. So one of the problems at home is you don't quite see the full defense. So oftentimes you can't tell if there's like a safety over the top, but I will say, and you'll have some Auburn fans mad online because that play happens mere minutes after the 4th down throw in the corner of the end zone where Brisker and Hudson did get tangled up a little bit. The difference, and this is where, again, Herbie's the greatest football commentator alive right now. And
Agreed.
He's the nail on the head.
Of all time.
Brisker turns, and he's watching the ball, and him and Hudson are hand fighting, and they get tangled. And basically the Auburn guy kind of falls and just pulls him down. But he has his head turned, and he's playing the ball. The Auburn defender on that play never turned around. And there wasn't a ton of contact, but he just ran through Dotson, who slowed down. And whether Clifford underthrew it intentionally or just didn't throw a great ball, either way, the underthrown ball is almost the go-to at this point in today's football because of the way they call pass interference. Basically, Dotson slows down, and this guy just keeps running through him, and Dotson kind of can't come back to the ball. It wasn't a ton of contact, but the defender never turns his head, and he has his helmet in Dotson's chest as he kind of goes through him. And, again, I'm a Penn State homer, but it looked like a no-brainer to me. And, the key is you just got to get your head turned around because if you look like you're playing the ball, I think the officials give you so much more leeway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
To echo Jordan's point, I don't. There's no guarantee that you even get the punt off from punting where you're out there.
Well, yeah, that's what I said in the stands. I was like, I could just see Michigan State happening right there in the end zone, and like, I was like, we need to get a first down here at least. And when I saw the play call, Deven looked at me. He's like, yeah, we're just gonna throw this up to Dotson, right? I was like, yeah. And the Auburn fans in front of us were like, as the play happened, they're like, yeah, I mean, he was all over him. So they had no qualms about that. But speaking of other calls during the game, let's cover some of the horrific SEC crew calls. So let's start with the big one of the day at 11:45 in the second quarter, the intentional grounding. Zach, run us through what you saw on TV, and we'll give you the perspective from our side of the end zone, which is where Clifford was throwing the ball to.
Yep. So what we obviously saw was a couple of receivers to the right and running different routes, and Washington ultimately ran like a 10 or 12-yard hitch, and the safety and Clifford winds up to throw, and the safety is jumping forward to cover Washington, and he just throws the ball deep, and there's nobody in the vicinity of it defensively or offensively, and all of a sudden you see flags, and of course, if you're someone who has a general understanding of the rules of football, you understand that intentional grounding is a rule that is applicable to a quarterback who is under duress. You can be in a clean pocket and throw the ball out of the stadium if you want to. Because there's
I actually looked up the rule because I was a little confused on it. It does say specifically in the rule book for 2021 NCAA rule book, it says the quarterback who's in the pocket still throws the ball to avoid loss of yardage and is under duress. It specifically says that.
It's to protect against the quarterback throwing the ball away to nobody to better the offensive team's situation. Clifford throwing the ball a mile to nobody while he was not under duress doesn't do Penn State any good. It's not as if it's not improving their situation versus a guy that's in the pocket about to get sacked and then just like launches it into the third row.
Oh, you mean like Bo Nix, like a quarter later?
Perhaps, but and it seems elementary. And credit to Herbie and Chris Fowler, they were all over that, and they were like, "What is going on?" I mean, they frankly said, I've literally never seen this before. And from there, we got the chaos that was Penn State. So that was a 15-yard penalty tacked on to second down and 25 or whatever it would have been. And we threw a relatively short route in the flat.
Is that 8-yard out to Dotson, yeah.
And next thing you know, we're punting. And myself and I'm sure everybody else at home is like, that's only the third play of that drive. Like, why is the punt team on the field? I obviously wasn't paying attention to what the chain gang thing said, but
I was like, had it at fourth as well.
And I mean, you can see Franklin on the sideline screaming and yelling. My thing is, if you're punting, and again, this is where I go back to, I don't care about 5 yards. We're not punting the ball. We're standing on the sideline and yelling at the officials until they get it right.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know
we were
what.
At midfield. We were at midfield.
So this is the problem. Yeah, this is the problem with that, though, because I was looking into the rules and the SEC explanation saying, oh, if they couldn't overturn it because we punted the ball. But if they rule it third down or fourth down and we just say it's third down and we go for it, they're just going to say, and we don't get it, they're going to say it's a turnover.
No,
so then
I'm not saying run a play. I'm specifically saying do not run a play. Just take a delay a game and continue to yell at the officials.
Yeah, and
my only concern with that, Zach, is that Franklin said that they, and again, this is so tough to see in the stadium, so maybe you have a bit clearer version of this, but Franklin said after the game that they talked to replay, and replay agreed that it was fourth down. That's why everyone was so baffled at what was happening, that replay told them, no, it's fourth down.
Yeah, no, and that is what he said, and he said they even got on the radio and I guess called down to Birmingham and they were like, yeah, go SEC. I don't know, but I mean, for me, I just think
Roll Tide.
That's great. The extra 5. Yeah, I mean that's what Franklin said, is that the guys in the field all agreed, and they even used their mics to like call down to whoever is in their head, whoever's in the head.
Yeah, so I looked into it.
That extra minute, and I'm not even punting. I'm just taking a delay of game, and I'm continuing to yell at the officials. First down was the alleged intentional grounding. That means the next down is second down plus the yards. We threw an out route to Dotson. We're on third down right now. And just continue to hammer that and continue to hammer that. Because once you punt, it's over. They can't go back and change it. But either way, they probably were never going to go back and change it because they just were inept. But I think those are the types of mistakes that you can't have. Like, presumably these guys get paid a decent wage to do this job. You can't have those types of procedural mistakes. Pass interference, holding, that stuff's really hard to call in real time. I try not to get too jazzed about that, but yeah.
Yeah, there's no excuse for this. They even said, so they have the chain gang who messed it up, the full officiating crew. So right there's 12 people or something like that, or 8 people who already have messed it all up. And then they had the replay booth, which is another like 4 or 5 people. And they had a secondary chain group that's on standby in case people get hurt too, that have to watch the game, make sure everything's going well. So I think I saw somewhere, I forget where it was, that there was like 16 people involved who messed up the call, which is just like, how does that happen? Like, this is the primetime game of the week, college game day, like the biggest game, one of the biggest games of the season so far in the entire country, and you make like a mockery of yourself like that. It's just really bad for the SEC officiating brand. Not that Penn State or Big Ten officiating is all that much better, but I've never seen something like that happen before.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see these guys hired by the Big Ten and at our next game in Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some bad officiating. I mean, it's nothing new for Penn State homers to have bad officiating, but all right. So we had the obviously missed call there. What the hell happened on this 4th down spot? Because from my seat, we had that by 2 yards, and I don't know. I've tried to look at the replay. They did not blow it dead before he got across the line, so I don't know what you saw or what happened there.
So yeah, that one was another interesting one, and it's hard for you guys in the stadium to see what's going on. It's also hard for the viewers at home to hear when the whistles were blown relative to where the ball carrier was at. First off, again, I'll jump back and say, I think if you want to go for it there, you just put your offense on the field.
Yeah, you just go for it.
All that said, so Mustafa was the up man, our defensive tackle, and he gets the ball. He gets absolutely stoned. The interior of the punt team just gets blown up. He gets stoned like 2 yards behind the yard to gain, and he just bounces to the left and gets just about to the yard to gain and gets stonewalled there. And the Auburn D and the Penn State people behind him, just everyone sandwiches him, and he's just getting smashed. And there's a point in time where I think if you're an Auburn person, you could justifiably say his forward progress has stopped, and it's kind of like it's been like stalemated. But I can't hear the whistles because you can't hear the whistles. But the generally speaking, my understanding is the side officials run in as soon as the whistle is blown. They start running in to get the spot, and the guys on the sideline, they clearly, from my observation watching it, they didn't start running in until he was well past the first down line. Ultimately, the surge of the Penn State guys pushed him across the line. Nobody can argue that he didn't ultimately end up like 2 yards past the yard to gain. And by my account of it, the officials didn't start running in with their hand in the air to signal, I'm making the spot, until after we were past the yard to gain. But who knows when the whistles were blown? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to call. I just thought for sure we had that, and I was absolutely shocked when they said no. I was like, that has to be a bad spot. So we'll stop harping on the refs a little bit here, because they actually did get a call right, which was that targeting call. I despise the targeting call. I think it needs to go, but per the rules, that was the correct call. I just hate to see, arguably their best defensive player get thrown out, preventing a touchdown which is what he did. There's nothing else I think he could have done there. But per the rules, he made forcible contact to the neck and head area and led with his helmet, even if it made shoulder contact a little bit before the helmet. He's still using the crown of his head there. So I don't know what you saw there on the targeting call, Deven or Zach speaking.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Zach again on this one. I didn't see it live, and they specifically did not show it on the replay board at the game. So I just saw it today for the first time a few hours ago when I looked it up. And it seems like it's probably targeting, but again, it's football. So if you don't call it, you don't call it. I don't really care. It's targeting. So targeting is such a hot button topic, but you're playing a dangerous sport. So I don't know.
He had the first down anyway, so it wasn't a big, I don't think it really changed the course of the game, in my opinion.
I think he'd arguably saved a touchdown. Parker Washington was spinning, and here's the problem. He's spinning, and he's using his hand to hold him up, so he's still alive, and he's sort of spinning towards the end zone, the goal line, and he's 2 feet off the ground. So a defender has a right to try to abate the offensive player's forward progress, stop him from scoring a touchdown, and he's 2 feet off the ground. So you're basically going to have to dive at him. And how do you dive at somebody and then remove your head from the equation?
Feet first.
Just spike them with your cleats. I don't know. You could say, as Jordan has, that based on the reading of the rules, and I think the problem is the rule is just when you apply the language of the rule to a lot of different tackles, it just is what it is. I think although I don't really trust officials to get things right, I would be comfortable living in a world where we just allowed them to call an unsportsmanlike conduct on plays where someone's using malicious intent, and just recognize other plays that are just simply football plays. I think if you ask most officials, they'd probably say that was just a football play, but my hands are tied because I'm trying to apply the rules as best as I can, and that's a rule that I have to apply.
Right.
But
yeah, I think
the rule basically said if the player is using his head as a weapon, with malicious intent, call a penalty, and if he's just making a football play, let it go. For talking about whether something's a catch or not, the rule is basically did he catch the ball and make a football move? Well, what's a football move? So I don't see why we couldn't apply the same standard to the defensive player who's just trying to make a tackle. Was that guy making a clean defensive play? I think everyone would say yes, he was. He just was trying to make a tackle. If he could have done it without his head, I'm sure he would have. But when you dive at somebody on the ground, and the player wasn't on the ground, he was still up. But when you dive at somebody who's 2 or 3 feet off the ground, how do you get your head out of there?
Yeah, it's just kind of a catch-22 there, but. Anyways, we'll move on. I think we've hit the game in depth. Overall, just a big statement win for Penn State, and James Franklin just keeps chugging along and winning games. And other than last year, I haven't been the biggest James Franklin fan, but he's been great for our program. He really has. If you look at teams like Nebraska, you absolutely cannot fire a 9-win coach. You cannot do that. So, I wish we could have back, a couple seasons, 2017 specifically. But, Franklin called a pretty good game, and this new offensive coordinator we have is everything I want. We lined up under center so much. We're quarterback sneaking. I swear, the touchdown we had with our tight end, direct snap, Wildcat, that stuff I haven't seen us run ever. So it's been great. That's pretty much the wrap up of the game. Let's go in. Deven, do you want to talk about anything in regards to College Game Day? I've been to Game Day before, but I know this was your first time. What did you think?
Yeah, so this is my first ever experience of a Penn State whiteout. Obviously been a Penn State fan from birth, but just have never been able to go to a lot of games for life reasons and financial reasons. So this was my first ever whiteout game. Game day, we stayed for about 2 hours, and then we decided to go get some food before everyone else left so that we could beat the rush. But game day was really amazing to see how many people were there. just so much support. The signs. I think Jordan probably took notes on some of the best signs, but just it's so funny what people come up with, and to like see them and talk to people that you're around was just pretty wild experience to be at game day and to see these people like in real life, of as far as like Kirk Herbstreit and Lee Corso and David Pollock and Chris Fowler, like just to see them and be 50 yards from them is pretty wild. So
maybe not David Pollock, but
I don't know. I like David Pollock. Jordan and I had this conversation too. I know I shouldn't, but I do. I think he's all right.
I mean, how dare you not mention Heisman winning Desmond Howard also?
Yes, I'm sorry. I did forget about Desmond Howard, Heisman winner. Go Blue.
Super Bowl MVP.
I don't mind Desmond Howard. I like him better than Pollock.
Yeah, I'm not a big Pollock fan either, but I mean, it's fine. I can't like.
I mean, it could be worse. We could have Lou Holtz back.
Please no.
No matter what, where you stand with ESPN, it's great for the program. It's great for the school to have that type of exposure, and you kind of got to play along with it, and you know.
And it's like the only thing ESPN does right.
Yeah, that one shot too, because obviously they like if you haven't been to game day, they project like what you're seeing on ESPN. They have giant TV screens so you can see it because you're like behind the analysts, obviously. That shot with Old Main in the background was just iconic. Like that was awesome. And seeing Saquon walk down there, like I said, we were gone by that time, so we were watching it from the bar. But just to see him walk out of Old Main and down that pathway, like, was so cool.
Yeah, I will say that the podcast here did have some predictions about who the guest picker was. I
was wrong.
There was someone who thought that it would be Saquon, and then there were others that thought for sure it would not be. But
so that's going to wrap up today's podcast. Thanks for listening to the Nittany No Huddle podcast, and I'll see you next time. This is Jordan signing off. Thank you, Zach and Deven, for being on the show. We look forward to bringing you more content.